Hey, Tansy. Okay, I'm sending you my notes and my ideas or thoughts, suggestions for your presentation next week. Where are my notes? Over here. Okay. So I was thinking that, I'm going to block our little video there. I was thinking that everyone else that's going to come to speak, participate in Career Day, they're going to talk about the benefits of volunteering and cover a lot of topics that I think if we cover, it's going to be redundant. You know, the benefits of volunteering. When you volunteer, it looks good on your CV. Um, the people that you meet when you volunteer, and on and on and on. Let's focus for our presentation from the international perspective, since we are an international organization, even though we are based in the United States. We are an international organization working under the umbrella of the United Nations. And I know that sometimes, as you said, when you mentioned the United Nations, that people get distracted from what we're talking about. But I think it's important that we stay on topic. Okay, so for our work of A New Lens, I think one of the first things you want to do is someone introduces you, then you have the opportunity to welcome everyone and thank them for participating in this career day, and thank the host for the hostess for inviting us to participate again. And then it's important to acknowledge all the other organizations that are participating. You can always say something like all protocols observed, but it's also great to acknowledge everyone who was there, and say something about, you know, together we are trying to make a positive impact on the next generation of leaders. And let's do refer to our young people as the future generation and our next leaders. Let's begin to plant that seed. Also, you want to talk from a position of engaging in a conversation and not talking to the audience, but bringing the audience in to chat with you, so that it's a conversation that you're having instead of just a presentation where we're throwing information at people, where we want to bring people in. Okay, so you've been introduced, and you do the formalities of acknowledging the other organizations and also reiterate why you were there today. Then you want to introduce yourself, and you want to talk a little bit about yourself and your journey through volunteering, and what volunteering has meant for you, and how volunteering has impacted your personal life, your professional life, and acknowledge some of the milestones that you've been involved in, whether it started from a young girl in church, bluebirds, brownies from wherever, knocking on doors, collecting, I don't know, clothes, or whatever you may have done as a child, and then bring it from the childhood to your teenage years, to your young adult years, to where you are now. So what we want to try and do is to get the young people to see that you don't wake up one day and become who you are, that it's a path in progress. And we want them to consider volunteering as a very important part of their career path. And we as an organization want them to consider the international arena in volunteering. Okay? So after you've introduced yourself and you've talked about your work with SOSEF, then you want to be sure that you introduce SOSEF, that, you know, we are going on our 20th year. We have worked in countries all over the world. We are based in Kansas. The Shirley Ann Sullivan Educational Foundation is named after the founder's mother, Shirley Ann Sullivan, who is from Ark, Kansas City, Kansas. The founder is from Ark, Kansas City, Kansas. And even though we are from Ark, Kansas City, Kansas, and our young people with us today are from Wichita, Kansas, we want them to know that just because this is where you are today doesn't mean this is where you may always be if you don't want to be. You have the opportunity to do anything in life that you want, and we want to introduce you to the opportunities that international volunteering can do for you. And yes, there are international volunteer opportunities available for people in Kansas, and that's something that you can tell them we'll talk about later. Okay, and you want to talk about SOSEF and the work that we've done, and then we want to talk to them about the success stories that come from youth volunteers, and how SASEF has its own group of youth volunteers when we are doing a project implementation. We want to share the story of Jack, who was a young man who lived halfway on the street and halfway in an orphanage, and he became a SASEF youth volunteer. And because of his volunteer experience, he was able to go on and co-found a youth nonprofit. And after forming this youth nonprofit, the nonprofit was identified by a United Nations initiative, and they became part of a global initiative for youth employment. And he was able to travel all over the world to train in how to become a better leader, how to lead an organization, how to have an impact on people. And all of this was through volunteering. And he didn't, I mean, all of the travel was all paid for. Everything was scholarship. And he went on from becoming a volunteer. Because of his volunteer experience, he was actually hired by British Petroleum and trained at British Petroleum in the procurement sector while he was in university. And then after university, he was actually hired by the government of Angola to run the procurement section for the Angola oil company, for the government controlled company, and that was huge. And then he went on to become, of course, a SASEF director. So we can see full circle how his volunteering with us from a very young age affected him for nearly a decade. Then let's also talk about Daniele, another SASEF youth volunteer who actually, after she received her education, was working in law, and she was a lawyer and decided that this is not what I want to do anymore. I want to, excuse me, I want to become a volunteer and get involved in international politics on the community side. So this is another person living in a small town, volunteering for larger organizations, and becoming a SASEF youth volunteer, and was able to take the volunteer opportunities. Think about it. You leave your job, you go to UNESCO as a volunteer, then you go to SASEF as a volunteer, and then from there you're hired with an international nonprofit organization that has you traveling all over the world. And you go on to become your own entrepreneur and start your own global business to impact situations at home. And then you can also talk about Fred. You know his story of becoming a SASEF volunteer and how it really changed his life. And then you know the story of Ophelia, also becoming a SASEF volunteer, and changed her life forever. And also Stephanie. So share some of those stories. And you want to bring the young people into the arena of seeing that just because you're in Kansas, just because you're in Wichita, Kansas, doesn't mean that you are limited. You still have as much opportunity as anyone else to enter into the international marketplace. That's not just for other people. Everyone within our foundation comes from a small village. We all do. And we have all used volunteering as a stepping stone, of volunteerism, as a stepping stone to the careers that we have engaged in. I think it's important to talk about, we're introducing them to international volunteer opportunities, and absolutely we are introducing them to international career opportunities. I think it's also important to talk about one of our newest partners in the Ariel Foundation International, and how the Ariel Foundation International works solely with the United Nations and bringing young people to the United Nations in New York, in Vienna, in Paris, in Geneva, to implement programs where we don't want to just talk about, okay, I'm telling you this, I'm telling you this. We want to know what changes you want to see in the world, what changes you want to contribute to. And you can do that when you are on a global stage. Now, let's change the trajectory a little bit and say, okay, so now you become an international volunteer. Maybe you want to stay in Wichita. Why not? There are international companies in Wichita that you can work with. We never say work for, because we always believe that um, when you are giving or selling your services to a corporation, that you are working with and you are not working for them. That's very important in what you want to tell them. I've already talked 10 minutes, so you only have 30, and I've talked 10. So you haven't even gone into telling the stories of Sasef and talking about more about you. But okay, and going forward, it's important that you ask them questions like, look at someone in the room and say, what are you interested in? So you're interested in media. Do you know that when you volunteer in an organization, you can volunteer just in the social media section under communications? You're interested in journalism. You also have the opportunity to volunteer in communications and write articles for the nonprofit. Or you're interested in being a lawyer. Then you want to volunteer with an organization that has a law department. Um, think about exactly who you want to become as an adult in society, what you want to do, and when you select and you are choosing your volunteer opportunities, that's where you want to volunteer in. You want to volunteer in that field. If you want to be a doctor, then you don't need to be a volunteer, let's say, in a soup kitchen. I mean, if someone comes in and they have an emergency, then you could watch a doctor help. But you want to align your volunteerism with your career goals. And the good thing about that, say you thought you wanted to be a journalist, and you get involved with volunteering and you're working in journalism, and you decide, you know what, I don't like this. This is not what I wanted to do. Then you can leave, and then you can go on and volunteer somewhere else. Okay, so these are just ideas for you to share with them. I think it's important repeatedly to say you have to remember we are in Wichita, Kansas, and that doesn't limit you. Touch on the likes of the former U.S. ambassador to South Africa, who's actually from Kansas City, Kansas, former Ambassador Delana Lewis. I think it's important to touch on our local heroes, people who look like us, talk like us, educated like we are educated, to show young people that just because this is where you are, it doesn't mean it's a bad place. Just this is where you are doesn't mean this is where you have to stay, or you can decide that this is where you want to stay. So if anybody would like more information, it's what you want to tell them. If anyone would like more information about international volunteer opportunities, global opportunities, scholarship opportunities, write to me is you, Tansy, write to me and be sure and use the hashtag A New Lens. And then I will know that you're coming from this special group of people, and we will get back with you ASAP. Okay, so I think I gave you all the information. You can also talk briefly about the Peace Corps, because probably everybody's heard about the Peace Corps and they can relate to the Peace Corps. Okay, so again, just in wrapping up, when you are introduced, you thank everyone in the room for being there. You thank the hosts for inviting us. And then you introduce yourself and your volunteer opportunities, and you introduce Sasef, tell about the work that we do, where we're from, where Shirley Ann Sullivan's from. And then you will tell Sasef success stories from people coming from small villages and going on to do enormous, amazing things. And then in closing, you want to be sure that you ask questions. Once again, say, no, what was that U.S. ambassador's name who was born in Kansas City? What's his name? And where is Shirley Ann Sullivan from? And where do we implement programs? And then you go also, don't forget to tell them about you're going to United Nations Women's Conference. It's a huge event. Amazing event. And how we have worked, and said, okay, well, now let's go there, because it's a possibility. I don't want to keep you. I'm at 14 minutes already. Look, gotta go. Love you. If you have any questions, let me know. I still wish we were giving out something else, like pencils with inspirational messages and something else to go with what they already have. But I'm a staunch believer that if somebody wants more information, you can give them your business card and we can go from there. Okay, babe. Love you. Bye.